Today's guest is a comedian, a writer, an actor, a voiceover actor, and a Salem, Massachusetts native. With an impressive career in Hollywood and New York, you can see him do stand-up all across this country. Please welcome Sean Lynch.
We started talking about how, because we met at Cinema Salem where we do our comedy stuff, and we're talking about the best and the worst movies that we saw growing up going to Cinema Salem. So you were saying, what was your worst one again?
It was Wild Hogs.
That's amazing.
It was tough.
It was so bad.
It was.
I remember seeing the poster and getting angry. And I remember being like, what is this? William H. Macy, what are you doing in this piece of hot garbage? And like Tim Allen Tim Allen gives me diabetes. And Martin Lawrence, it was literally like, you know how Batman has like a rogues gallery of villains?
Yes.
Like this was like a rogues gallery of comedy villains. I was like, oh, Martin Lawrence. Oh, Tim Allen. And then it's like they had captured William H. Macy, one of my favorite actors, like a princess in like Super Mario. And we're like making him do like this. I'm like, this man was nominated for an Oscar. Like, dude, what made William H. Macy go like, this sounds like a good idea? I mean, I got to imagine he's got kids.
Yeah.
Because once you have kids, that's where they can get you. Where you're like, oh, man, I really don't want to do Happy Madison 2 or whatever, but, Janie needs braces. So, it's... that's crazy, though, man. Cinema Salem, man.
The kids might like to see in a movie, too. That could be part of the fun. But I don't know. It's tough. I mean, I imagine it's also like, it opens you up for more things, but I don't know. That was a tough one.
Yeah, man.
I don't know. It was like my grandmother just being nice. I was probably like, 13 or 14 or something. She's like, let's go to the movies. Like,
that's amazing.
Like 30 minutes in. I remember both of us thinking like, this is weird. There was a lot of like homoerotic undertones, and they went skinny dipping in part of it, and I was like, that could have been all just left out.
I would go to cinema. Like a lot of comedians in their back, like I did not have really any friends growing up as a little kid. I was like the kid with the eye patch. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yep.
And so I would go to Cinema Salem as soon as I was old enough to like not be on my street, like somewhere around 10, 11, something like that. My parents would let me walk from up Highland Avenue from where I grew up to Cinema Salem, and I would just ravenously watch every movie there, good, bad, or otherwise. I would drag my sisters to see movies. I took one of my sisters to see Revenge of the Nerds too, and there's just so many filthy sexual references, and my sister's just like, what? Like we get home, and my at the time I think I was like 12 or 13, and my sister like ratted me out to my parents. They're like, we went to see a movie, and there were boobs and bush in the movie, by the way. And it was like, she was beside herself. Yeah, man. But I saw some amazing films there too. I started working there at Cinema Salem when I was about 15, working as an usher, and I remember in the summer of 1985, so it would have been like 13, 14. Oh, no, I was 12 turning 13. I saw Back to the Future at Cinema Salem, I'm going to say 30 times.
Whoa.
Something happened when I saw that movie where it wasn't just like the first time I saw Star Wars and I was like, this is my favorite movie ever. This is like, when I saw Back to the Future, I became obsessed with like, some kids like they're like autistic kids that can like take apart like your television and put it back together.
Yes.
And it's really because they just need to see what every part of the television does and then put it back together because they can't rest until they know every particular part of that television. I became that way about Back to the Future. I was like, why does this particular piece of music make my heart swell? Why does the way Christopher Lloyd say, this line, why does it make me cry? Like, why do I hate Biff so much? Like, what? And the more I would watch it, again and again, I started being like, oh, when the camera racks, I didn't know what rack focus was, but I learned later what a rack focus is, and I realized like Robert Zemeckis was like, oh, that rack focus makes you care more. Like that shot makes the stakes.
What is rack focus?
Rack focus is in every Spielberg and Zemeckis film. That's when the camera pushes in on the hero's face and the background kind of pulls back a little.
Okay.
Like the first rack focus shot ever was in Jaws. The first time the sheriff sees the little boy getting eaten by the shark, and the camera, it's like the camera pushes in, but the background, it's used in horror all the time, but it makes your heart go,
yeah, because you're drawing your full attention to something, right?
Yeah, and it really expresses that the character is just frozen with fear or elated that the love of his life walked in the front door. So, but it had like a real effect. And I also started learning like the shots where the camera is moving as the actors are moving, like really rapidly, that required a dolly, and blah, blah. And I just started really getting into the mechanics of like, because I couldn't figure out why this movie that I saw made me feel a million things. You know what I mean? And it was a big blockbuster hit, but I think the reason that it was such a big hit was that you can't watch that movie and not feel something.
Yeah, it was really impressive for its time.
I mean, and the history of it is crazy. One of the coolest experiences in my career was in 1998 when I was first working in Hollywood as a professional. I got a meeting with Will Smith's company. It's called Overbrook. It's basically the writer James Brooks and Will Smith, and they made like Fresh Prince and they made all the other sitcoms that the company's made. But they gave me a meeting, which went terribly.
Was Will Smith there?
No. And you know what?
Filming Fresh Prince.
It kind of like, I was kind of like, really? So I got a meeting with him. It was just me and James Brooks and like a couple other lackeys, and they were just looking for another body to write for they were producing a sitcom for Jaleel White called Grown Ups. Urkel wanted to be, do you remember Urkel?
Yep.
Yeah. So Jaleel White was getting older and he didn't want to be Urkel anymore, so he decided he wanted to be Stefan Urkel full time. So they wrote this pilot for him called Grown Ups, and it was cool Jaleel White and his dorky white friend and like single guys in LA trying to make it. And I guess James Brooks and his people had come to see, they came to see a play of mine in New York, and they were like, oh, this guy can really write snappy dialogue. So they called me in for a meeting, and it was literally like the most disappointing thing. I won't go into detail, but it was just a very disappointing meeting, I think, on both sides. And but when me and my best friend, who at the time was a comedian named Kevin Williams, and he and I had a sketch troupe together and a theater company together, and we were kind of joined at the hip. And the meeting went terribly, but when we got out of there, Kevin was all like, hey man, at least you had a meeting with Will Smith. I mean, that's kind of cool. I mean, we're wearing suits, we're in Universal, like, come on, man. And I was like, you're right. So what I realized was that we had these laminates. They're basically like these lanyards that had our photograph on it, and the production company we had the meeting with, and the Universal logo on it. And what I realized as we were walking out of the Overbrook building was that I was like, we can literally walk anywhere right now. Like for the next 24 hours, we are legitimately on the lot. So Kevin and I decided to get real high. And we walked on to like several movies that day.
That's awesome.
One of which I ended up in.
Whoa.
And this is the only good part of this story was the meeting went terribly. What are you going to do? So some meetings are just not going to go your way. But while we're walking around the lot, we found the set of Back to the Future that is still standing.
Wow.
The clock tower, that whole town's, it's still there. I don't know what Spielberg played. Like, I don't know how he managed to preserve it.
Yeah, that's
but
wild.
They won't touch it. Like Amblin Entertainment or they own that, and you can never, like, they can't. It's got some 30-year contract where you can't move that. So tourists are regularly brought through there.
Oh, that makes sense. I was trying to figure out, like, it seems so iconic, but also, like, you got to make movies, but the tourism industry is massive out there.
It's so universally loved that it works as a tour spot, because they bring you through, they show you the Jaws shark and they show you all the, classic things, and then they bring you through whatever new movie they have going on there. But so we walked through the Back to the Future, and, obviously Kevin and I were acting out Marty and Doc Brown, doing that for like 3 hours. And then we walked through a couple of other sets. They were shooting an episode of some cop series that's supposed to take place in New York. I'm guessing it was NYPD Blue. We didn't bother to ask. We would literally just snipe in. Like, we'd tuck our lanyards and snipe. We were both wearing suits, and so we could sneak in as extras anywhere. And we just thought, it'd be funny, man, if we wound up. But they do so many cuts, the odds were impossible. And towards the end of the day, as the sun starts to go low, we noticed that way on the other end of the lot, there were like 20 square blocks of Times Square in New York City that were only 4 stories high. So you have to imagine it was 5 blocks going north, 5 blocks going south. And I guess it was supposed to look like Broadway or Fifth Avenue or something like that. And you had all these buildings that were built with lights in them and extras walking through the windows. And I guess the camera would never rise high enough for you to see that it was all fake. And the camera was swinging by on a crane through these hundreds of extras that were walking through this fake New York City street. And I thought, dude, if there's ever a time we can sneak through, like, this is it. So me and Kevin did the same thing. We tucked the lanyards. We start walking and talking. We start walking close to the camera and pretending like we're having a conversation. And I noticed when we were on the set that one of the marquees in the fake Times Square had a movie that was called Shepherd's Walk. And we both had a mutual friend named Shepherd who was a stuntman. We thought, let's take a picture. We'll show Shepherd. We still didn't know what the movie was because it was just all extras. And at one point I got yelled at by one of the production assistant guys who was like, hey, back to 1, which means you have to go back to 1. And being a 27-year-old prick, I took out my lanyard, showed it to him, and I was like, do you know who the fuck I am? Why don't you go back to fucking playing with those lights, bro? Why don't we just... And the guy was like, sorry. He walks away, and I was like, ooh, no wonder people are dickheads here. I feel kind of fun.
Yeah, that was smooth.
So we did like 3 takes, and then we got bored, and then we just moved on to see what else we could mess with. Cut to almost a year and a half later at Christmas. I was taking my nephew out to the movies, and it was an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie called End of Days. And during the sequence where the devil comes and possesses Gabriel Byrne, who becomes the bad guy in the Schwarzenegger movie, I noticed that the camera is dipping through Times Square as this green mist is like, kind of weaving its way through Times Square, and it eventually goes through Times Square through hundreds of people, and it goes into a restaurant, and it finds Gabriel Byrne like taking a piss in a bathroom, and for some reason picks Gabriel Byrne as being the devil's embodiment to bring about the end of days. But as the green mist is going through Times Square, I noticed that the level of Times Square dropped to about 4 stories, and then way in the distance, I saw the marquee that said Shepherd's Walk, and I leaned over to my nephew, Sean, and I was like, you want to see a really cool trick? And he just nods at me. He's like, I'm going to put myself in this movie for like 2 seconds. And sure enough, when it goes by the movie theater with Shepherd's Walk, there's me and Kevin Williams like walking past.
Wow.
And my 6-year-old nephew was like... like, he couldn't...
Mind blown.
Yeah, man. I mean, at that point, he'd seen me on television a few times, but like that was like such a cool... It was worth the failed Will Smith meeting to have that little moment with my nephew in the, sometimes you got to take the L, and then later on it becomes the win. I don't know, man.
Yeah, that's a wild experience.
Right?
That's what's exciting about being out there, though. So if this thing will move like all around. So you want to kind of just keep it like magnetic to pretty much to your chin.
Okay.
Like, so when you lean back, just pull it back with you like that.
All right.
So it's really introspective of you to see Back to the Future 10,000 times and realize you were getting an emotional reaction from it, and then deciding that you wanted to dive deeper into where that came from.
Oh yeah.
So what from there brought you out to Hollywood.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version as much as I can. And if I start getting too long, as my friend, I'm going to ask you, just tell me to shut up and move on.
Okay.
So basically, a lot of things happened in a short time. You know, I started becoming obsessed with that movie, and then around that time, I started. There was like a I don't know, a year or two before the Back to the Future incident. I was obsessed with Saturday Night Live as a little kid, and I desperately wanted to, you know, be on Saturday Night Live. And in the fourth grade, I wrote a sketch for a school talent show, and I did it with a bunch of my friends. And you know, it went over well, and it just so happened to be that a guy who was an executive for PBS, whose son also went to my school, approached my parents after the talent show and was like, "You need to get him in a performing arts school, and you need to get, like, this kid can do this for a living." And of course, like, my mother was like, "Oh, that's wonderful." My father was like, "No, I'm not gonna have my son. He's not gonna be a fairy." You know, I really was made him
the
mad.
classic Billy Elliot story.
Yeah, he was like, "I can't. You're gonna be a lawyer." But eventually, I auditioned for this school called the Children's Academy of Performing Arts in Marblehead, and I got in, and they offered me sort of a partial scholarship. My father still said, "No, he needs to be playing sports." And my mother and my oldest sister pooled their money together and paid my tuition for my first year there. So what would happen is every day I would get out of school from fourth grade through the eighth grade. Every day I'd get out of school at about 3:00 in the afternoon, and I'd take the bus from Lynn to Marblehead, and I'd go, you know, doing acting stuff. So I did that, and then eventually, in high school, you know, I played football, but I also did the drama club and stuff. None of this is interesting, but what ended up happening was, I guess the game changer when I was in high school was I started writing plays. Like I saw going into my freshman year, I saw Back to the Future, and then and that really interested me in film. And then my sophomore year of high school, I got cast as like a lead actor in this play called Our Town. And I became obsessed with the way the play was written. I just thought, like, my 15-year-old mind just was blown. And I thought, I want to write a play. That's what I have to do. I have to write a play. I had nothing to say at 15 years old, but I desperately, you know, I just start writing. You know, when you're young, you start writing that this play is about a boy named John Pinch, and no one understands him. But, you know, like, but eventually, I lost one of my dearest friends. Childhood friends, had contracted leukemia, and passed away in my junior year of high school. And
that's heavy.
Yeah, dude, it could be the hardest thing about it was he kept it from us for years.
Damn.
He was a good-looking kid. He was real tall and strong. You know, wonderful athlete, really talented hockey player. But when he started to get sick, he just kept it from us. And he kept it from us all the way up to the end. And towards the end, when he was in the hospital for his last couple of weeks, his parents kept asking me to visit him. And I kept being like, "Oh, he's going to be fine. Brown will be fine. He's sick. Man, he's the toughest kid I know, you know, blah, blah." And then he died without me being able to say goodbye. And that fucked me up pretty good. And that's when I started just writing to process what I was feeling, because I didn't understand why I was feeling anger. I understood why I was feeling sad, but I was like feeling so angry at him and angry at his parents and angry at, and in trying to figure out what I was feeling, I ended up writing my first play, which was called A Question of Life, Love, and Puberty.
Oh, wow. What a title.
And yeah, and we ended up doing like a tiny production of it. Eventually I got into an acting school in California called the Frohman Academy. So my sophomore, junior years of high school, I would spend the summers in Carmel, California, studying at this performing arts.
Which part of California is that?
Carmel?
Yeah.
It's just outside. It's the Marblehead of San Francisco.
Okay.
That's the best way I can describe it. and we did a small staging of it at my acting school, and eventually one of my teachers had submitted the play to a program called Playwrights Horizons, which is a theater.
Playwrights Psoriasis?
Playwrights Horizons. It's Playwrights Psoriasis is actually amazing. That I think one day when that kicks in for this old man, I'll call it Playwrights Psoriasis. Playwrights, it's a rash of talent. But it was called Playwrights Psoriasis. It's still to this day. It's still there in the middle of Times Square, and they had this thing that's still going on to this day called the Young Playwrights Festival, and they would take submissions from hundreds of students from across America, and they would select the best 3, and then those 3 would be professionally produced by like real actors and a real director for like a week in Manhattan. And this is 1989, 90, like somewhere around there, and it got in. And it got selected, and what ended up happening was by the time it was up and running, I was already looking at colleges for, and these people from NYU were like, we really would like you to apply here. Like, we think you could actually get a scholarship. We'd like to have you, we're looking for young playwrights and blah, blah, blah.
That's awesome.
So I thought, cool, man, that sounds great. And of course my dad's like, no, you're going to Dartmouth. And, but eventually it kind of, I auditioned and applied and they basically, the only reason that I think they did was NYU was basically like, he'll only have to pay for his dorm and his books. My father was like, sold. So I got to New York. I was going to NYU, and I loved all my teachers, but I hated all the students because it was just all rich kids just getting fucked up and dyeing their hair blue and changing their name. Like I thought it was going to be the best of the best, like the best actors, the best writers, the best filmmakers. And there were several people I graduated with that are like the people that I went to college with at NYU at that time was Philip Seymour Hoffman, Paul Giamatti, Eli Roth, William H. Macy was one of our teachers. Like it was a like it was amazing. Like the talent that was there.
That's a powerful lineup.
But among all that, Billy Crudup, there was like but among that, out of all those, maybe 10 or so really outstanding people, there were like probably 5,000 spoiled ass rich kids who were basically just spending their parents' money for 4 years and doing all the drugs until they eventually, the trust fund would kick in and then they'd open a nightclub or something. I don't know. But I found that really discouraging. So somewhere around my freshman year, I'd written a play called The Guys Exhibit, and it ended up getting into the New York One Act Festival, and then it ended up winning the New York One Act Festival that year, and that caused a ruckus because...
Congratulations.
Thanks, man. It was like the first time like a 19-year-old had won, and it made me as many enemies as...
Can you say the title
friends. Again? The Guys Exhibit, like it's Guise,
okay.
like the like a disguise.
Yeah,
is
like a ruse or like a cover up or
and
something.
a guise is a truthful image. So it was, and it was basically... The conceit of it was, what if life were a museum and God and the devil were the curator?
Wow.
And they were the same person.
That's fun.
And it was real like early 90s theater-y kind of Brechtian stuff. But
you fit right in there.
Yeah. And so when that won, I got a nice chunk of change, and I decided I was going to start a theater company. And then that same summer, I met a fellow named Rick Crome, who was himself a very accomplished playwright and comedian, but he also happened to be the house MC at a club called the Comedy Cellar. And over that summer, he was like, "Well, you're a very funny young man. You should try stand-up comedy. You might think it's fun." And of course, at the time, I was like, "Yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know about that, like, take my wife, please, and all that crap. I don't know." He's like, "I don't think you know what comedy is." And so in the summer of 1992, he invited me down to the Comedy Cellar just to hang out. Like, he was hosting, and he was like, just check out some of the comics, and it's smarter than he was like, it's so much smarter than you think it is. And he was so fucking right. And the way that he baited me was, he was like, "Hey, why don't you come check it out?" And I was like, he's like, "I'll get you free beer." And I was like 19. So I was like, "Free beer? Yeah, buddy." So I'm sitting in the back of the club with Rick Chrome and a bunch of other comics, just watching these comics go up and perform. Now, you have to bear in mind, this was 1992, so I'm watching Dennis Leary, Janine Garofalo, David Cross, a young Bob Odenkirk, a young Jerry Seinfeld, a young Larry Miller, a young Lenny Clark. I mean,
wow.
And
I guess I didn't realize you were in New York for so long before you were out in L.A.
Yeah, I was in New York for almost. Well, it's weird. I was in every 10 years. I get stuck in L.A. for 2 years. That's kind of the way it goes. It's but so I was just seeing all these. Mark Maron would come in. Todd Barry, who hates my guts, was there. But they were like your age, like they were doing spots, but nobody was making money. And then the biggest thing that happened was that eventually, after a summer of just watching and watching and watching, one night Rick sandbagged me. It was like a Tuesday night. Couldn't have been like more than like 15, 17 people in the audience. It was the end of the night. There were nothing in the audience but drunks and other comics. And Rick used to host the show by sitting at a baby grand piano, and he would improvise songs for each, he'd be like, next
fun.
Up it's Jacob Hall.
I love
he
that.
fought in blah, 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 da, Jacob Hall, and then, and he was amazing. And so it's the end of the night. He's wrapping up. Dave Attell had just closed the show. This is when he had a full head of hair.
Wow.
This is when Jeff Ross was Jeff Lipschultz.
Whoa.
It was
I didn't
crazy.
know that one.
So
Was he David Hill doing Insomniac then?
No, dude, this was 7
Prior?
years before.
Oh, wow, okay.
This was Dave Attell when he had just started getting paid like $20 spots. Like Dave Attell, Todd Barry, Louis C.K., and Jeff Ross were like working at the, like, they were opening the shows at the big clubs, They were starting to get like some writing work, like Louis had gotten that SNL gig like somewhere in the late 90s. Like they were like doing it.
And then he had his breakthrough with Pootie Tang.
Well, yeah. I mean, I could do a whole fucking podcast on all of his accomplishments. But so it's late August and summer 1992, and he's closing out the show, and he starts playing his piano. And I think he's rapping down, ladies and gentlemen, your final comedian for the evening is a young comedian, also a very very accomplished young writer of some note. Some of you may know that the Village Gate Theater recently had its one-act festival, and this young man at 19 years old won Best Playwright. And the few people who were there like gave me like a weak applause. Please get. And as soon as he said that, my heart sank, and I'm like, oh no. And he's like, please give it up for Sean. And as soon as I turn, there's Rick Shapiro. And I think it was like Rick Shapiro and Dennis Leary, or like Rick Shapiro and somebody else. And when I turned to them terrified, like Shapiro was like, you better get your ass up there. And so I get up on stage, and I had a complete panic attack, which somehow worked. Like it was... I started having a panic. Like I literally went up and apologized for a minute that I'm not supposed to be here, and I'm not a comedian, and how dare you, and da da da. And the audience started laughing a little, and
you won them over.
And then I kind of centered myself for a second, and I was like, all right. And it was more like to be like, Rick, I'm going to show you how much I suck at this. So I shored myself up, and I tried to do what I would think was a routine based on how I watched all those people over the summer. So I remember the first joke I ever told on stage. I was like, I live in the dorms across the street from the cellar. I have a roommate. He, masturbates constantly, and he's from California, so he's really free with his body, and I'm from New England, so I'm ashamed of myself that he's masturbating. And one day I came in, and he was just masturbating on his bed, and I yelled at him, and I was like, Dave, knock it off. And he goes, hey, man, it's perfectly natural. And I said, not the way you're doing it. Why are you wearing a Darth Vader mask? And what's with the cream corn? What the fuck? And that first big laugh was like that first hit of cocaine. You were literally like,
that's all it takes.
And literally like my spine locked up, and I was like, oh. And then I just went into a bunch of bits about living in a dorm. And, by the end, this is before cell phones, where he had a little pen light that would like light you. And I got off stage and I was like, oh my God, I did stand-up comedy. This is insane. And of course, it immediately became an addiction. I was definitely lucky in a lot of ways that I couldn't see. When you're young and you're coming up and you get your breaks, you always think, oh, it's because I was so good. And you get older and you realize, no, you were in the right place at the right time. You had the right haircut on the right day. The right person was sitting in the audience on that Monday when you were bombing. And you know what I mean? Like there's so much chance to this business. Like the only thing you could control is you. And eventually the universe will align itself if you're focused and you're doing your thing, Because I spent about, a year or two just doing guest spots, no pay, beer and wings. And somewhere around 1993, this 14-year-old kid from Washington, D.C. came in, and he was the best comedian I'd ever seen in my entire life. I guess he was 17 by the time he got to New York. So he was 17. He'd started when he was 14. And I had never seen a comedian with such poise and such control and charisma. Like I was just awed by him. And eventually, because there weren't teenagers in comedy in the early 90s. There were 4 of us. There was Sarah Silverman, me, Jordan Rubin, and of course, and Dave Chappelle, mm-hmm. who was, and so it wasn't like, we'd kind of all sit together because, well, you know what I mean? Nobody else wanted to sew that,
That's true.
And then eventually, you all go for a slice after the show. And then eventually, like friendships kind of happen. And that kind of helped me kind of fast track because people had eyes on Dave from the minute he, he
was a force to be reckoned with. You could tell right off the bat, right?
Steinberg and Katz brought him from Washington, D.C. to New York.
And it's like, who does stand up outside in a park? Like he's notorious for just
what?
Being
one
like,
of the biggest reasons that Dave used to do. I'm not telling any secrets here, but he used to like to hang out there just to like smoke weed and like talk to girls or play chess or whatever. And then Albert Owens, who was this old black comedian that we all kind of idolized, who never liked to do stand-up in comedy clubs because he thought they were bullshit. He would go out into the fountain at Washington Square Park on the weekends and do like 5 shows standing in the fountain and pass his hat around. And I'm telling you, brother, he would make several $100s doing that.
That's impressive.
He would do like an hour set. To
get people to listen to you outside in the first place and for more than 2 seconds is crazy.
And Dave adored him. He just thought he was the great, and he was. Albert Owens was one of the unsung heroes. He's one of those guys that famous comics loved, but nobody who wasn't there in the 80s and 90s in Washington Square Park had ever heard of him.
Yeah, I've never heard of him.
Because he refused. When he started doing shows out on subway platforms and blah, 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 and eventually when he got into the clubs, they were like, "Oh, great job. Here's $20." He's like, $20, motherfucker. Fuck you. And so Dave started just doing, and the more famous Dave got, the more he would do shows with, because he realized he was helping Albert. So, by the time, which was always sort of a trademark of Chappelle's that I always loved, the more he rose, the more he took people with him. And he was very mindful of other people. It's one of the reasons he's a brilliant comedian. He's a very empathetic human being. And, by 94, he had already started, after he had done that HBO and Comedy Central stuff, like he was off to the races. And then by the time he was doing Con Air and whatnot, like then maybe I'd see him once every 2 years, because he was. But it was just amazing, when he was in town. He's not just a gifted comedian. He has a gifted soul. That's the only way I could say it. He is. Even when he was a teenager, he was just so much more evolved as a human being. Like, I didn't realize you could come out of the womb like that. Do you know what I mean?
There was definitely something special about.
Dude,
his
his
experience.
But yeah, so and then what kind of happened? My first break in comedy was somewhere around 1994. Some older comics had realized, oh, this kid's a really good opener. Like he's got really good energy. So then they all wanted me to like open for him.
You have excellent energy.
And oh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Well, and then the clubs eventually wanted to make me an MC because they were like, oh, he puts the audience in a good mood. And I didn't realize that was a trap. Because a lot of times when you get hired to be an MC at a club, you make good money. You know, you make like $100 a show, which, you know, when I was 21, 22 years old, that was do that 3-4 times a week. You don't need to deliver pizzas. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, but it's also a trap because eventually the industry just sees you as an MC and you start getting passed by for shit. And I started to watch like Dave and Sarah and about like they all started getting like all this work, and I realized that if I didn't pull out on the MC thing, I was gonna be labeled, and that was dangerous. So then I stopped doing that and just went back to just being a regular, you know, guy doing a spot. And you know, I was working as an intern for MTV, and you know, going to school.
MTV was in New York.
Oh
Yeah, I guess they were in Times Square. I remember
15,
TLC.
15 Broadway, 44th
Did you ever
Broadway.
meet Carson Daly?
Brother, I got some story. I'm friends with Carson. We'll get to that. Actually,
right.
You know what? I'll get to it real quick. All
Okay.
right. So, Reader's Digest version. 1995, I get hired as a PA for a TV show on MTV called Saturday Morning. And basically, it was a very Gen X show. Drew Barrymore hosted the show. And it was basically, the whole show was grunge bands doing covers of Saturday morning cartoons from the 70s and 80s. So if you wanted to see Wu-Tang do the theme to Thundercats, you know, like if you wanted to see...
Do you think that footage is online somewhere?
I can show it to you. It's we had Matthew Sweet doing the theme to Scooby-Doo. We had the Ramones do the theme to Spider-Man. We had God, who else was on there? We had the Pixies doing Josie and the Pussycats.
Wow.
Like it was insane. Well, Kim Deal from the Pixies and Juliana Hatfield. To be fair, Frank was not part of that. But but it was it was just a cool kind of like, hey, we're so Gen X show. And I loved it. I loved working on the show, even though it paid, you know, it paid like $100 a day, and it was a 14-hour day, and I was humping cameras and lights and cable, and occasionally I'd have to hold their guitars in between takes and stuff like that. But that led to working with people on other music videos and getting a chance to work on some like seminal 90s videos with directors like Sam Baer or Doug Liman, or, you know, guys who went on to become these blockbuster directors who were, you know, I mean, that was actually in the 90s, that was the shortcut to Hollywood. Was if you had a hit music video, they would hire you to direct a feature like out of the gate. I mean, that's how a lot David Fincher, that's how
It's
he
an
got
interesting
Alien
resume.
3.
they don't even seem like they would like correlate a
It's
music
a
video
lot-
and then a feature.
It's a lot more congruous than you might think, because from a producer's perspective, you don't have a lot of money to shoot a music video, and usually you only have 2 to 3 days, sometimes even just a day to shoot. Like Sam Baer shot Smells Like Teen Spirit in a day. God, I'm trying to think of Smashing Pumpkins, Bullet with a Butterfly Wings. Sam shot that in maybe 3 days, but that's because it had that elaborate set with like the mud pit and the zombies and the special effects and whatnot. But what that proved to the studios, because they were always looking for talented and cheap, was they were like, if this kid can direct a music video that like changes Generation X for $100,000 in a day, imagine what he can do with this new sci-fi project that we have. So what happened was, in the 90s, a lot of these guys were making small independent films, but their day job was making commercials and music videos. And anyway, I digress. So I was working there as an intern, and I was loving it. You know, I thought right before I was graduating from NYU, that's what I was going to do. I was going to do stand-up comedy at night and work as a PA during the day. And I was like, okay, I guess that's, you know, hopefully, you know, that'll be a way to sustain myself. And about a week before I graduated from NYU, some producer from The Daily Show had seen me at the Cellar and said, "Hey, man, you're really funny. You should. Would you ever be interested in coming up to a club called Stand Up New York and just opening a show? We're doing a showcase." And I did not know at 22 years old what showcase meant. I thought it just.
You need to pull out your phone and Google it.
No, unfortunately, and my Etsy didn't have any information about that showcase either. But it was, and I'm glad I was lucky that I didn't know, because then I wasn't afraid. And what turns out was it was an industry showcase for like the top 10 young comedians were about to do a showcase at this club for a room full of casting directors and agents and blah, blah, blah. And I guess this was an annual thing. Now, this guy didn't want me to be one of the 10. He wasn't like, he just thought, I bet if I have that kid do 10 minutes up front, it'll get that audience in a perfect mood to see the clients of mine that I want to succeed, And I didn't know any of this. I just knew, oh my God, a grown-up club on the Upper West Side wants me to do a grown-up set. Amazing. Maybe they'll give me chicken wings, and so a week before I graduate, I was starting to sweat a little, because the reality of not living in the dorms, the reality of not having my parents taking care of me, the reality of, I was about to move into a terrible, cramped apartment on the Upper East Side with 4 other dudes. And, I was doomed,
Classic comedy condo.
Yep. And and so basically I got up on stage, and my whole set was, I'm graduating in 7 days, and I'm just waiting for, how long it's going to take before I'm a male prostitute in the West Village. And then I just started doing an impression of me in the movie Midnight Cowboy, like trying to blow an old man behind a tree or something. And then I, was just doing some crowd work, because I knew what I was there for. My whole day, I got to make these guys look good in front of these guys, and I got to make this crowd have a good time. And so it went well. The audience seemed to be really enjoying themselves, and I walked off stage, and I felt good enough that I was like, wow, maybe they'll ask me to come back. Right on. So I went to sit at the bar, and I'm sitting at the bar with Jeff Frost and Todd Barry and a couple other comics who were like probably 30 at the time. And I'm 22. And as I'm sitting there at the bar, these 2 good-looking dudes in suits come out towards me, and they were like, "Hi, Sean. Wow, you certainly do a lot of voices." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, thanks, man." And I'm just thinking they're dudes, whatever. And one of them whips out his business card, and the business card says the William Morris Agency. And he's like, "My name's Brian Stern, and this is Mike August, and we're with the William Morris Agency. And have you ever thought about a career in voiceover?" And I literally turned to him. I was like, "I don't know, dude. Does it pay like money?" And they had your exact reaction. They were like, "Yes, it pays a lot of money, Sean. You can make so much money. There are a lot of comedians like you who do voices for cartoons and commercials." And before he got even anything else out, I was like, "Cartoons! Oh my God, I love cartoons. It's been my dream to work on cartoons. My friends and I make cartoons in a basement." And they were like, "Okay, well, that's good. Now you have our card, and give us a call tomorrow, and we'll set up a meeting." And they leave. And so I'm just holding Brian Stern's card, and I look to my left, and like Jeff Roth just goes, "Shit, man, that never happens." And Todd Barry, who hated me, was just seething and staring at me. And that never went away. And then about 2 hours later, another woman came out from the thing and was like, "Hi, Sean. My name's Karen Apicella, and I'm with Frontier Booking International. And, we're a booking agency, and we'd be very interested in having you do some work with us and blah, blah." "Oh, thanks, man." Right on. And then towards the very end of the show, this sweet older-looking man who looked like a cross between F. Murray Abraham and Obi-Wan Kenobi comes out of the back, and he was like, "Sean Lynch, hello, my name is Carrie Hoffman. This is my club." And I was like, "Oh, hey, dude, great." And he's like, "I would like you to come by tomorrow afternoon, and we are going to discuss management." And I said, "Well, shit, mister, I don't know anything about managing a comedy club, but I'll learn, man." And he's like, "Oh, no, it's not. It's not that sort of. It's career management. I have several clients, and I look out for them. I make sure that they're okay. And I was like, yeah, man. Well, and I didn't realize he had watched the other exchanges, but I was like, yeah, man, dude, look at these cards, dude. I got a card from William Morris, and I got a card from something called Frontier Booking. He goes, see, those are good things, and that's very exciting that you got those. But do you know what time you should call them? Do you know which person you should ask for when you call? These are the things I can help you with. And I was like, man, Mr. Hoffman, that'd be fucking great, man. And I immediately, it was all happening so fast that I literally turned to him at one point and I was like, dude, please don't take this the wrong way, but I need to run downstairs to your bathrooms for obvious reasons, but also that's where your payphones is, and I have to call my mother and let her know I had a good night. And so he was like, sure, no problem. And he wrote down his office number on a cocktail napkin, and I shoved it in my pants, and I ran down to the bathrooms at Stand Up New York, and I called my mom, and I was like, Mom, you know that thing that I was always hoping would happen? I think it's happening. And of course my mom was like, oh no, what is this, drugs? Is it drugs? Yeah. And I was like,
it's always drugs. No, Mom, it's not.
An agent came over to me and wants me to call them, and a booker wants me to call them, and a manager wants me to call them, and I think I might have finally made it in. And my mom was like, just be careful, just don't go anywhere with anybody.
Watch out for those parties.
Yeah, they were like, and boy, she was right. But that summer is where everything kind of started. I did a small role in an HBO film, and I played a small role in a Glade air freshener commercial, and I started doing voice work for radio and television commercials, and back then you didn't get a lot of money up front. You mostly got most of your money on royalties and residuals.
Like syndication? Is that the?
Yeah.
I heard when I lived in LA, I heard people always talked about getting on commercials.
That's where the money is. And back in the 90s, if you did, say, a Budweiser commercial, like you were the voice of Budweiser.
You're the frog.
Yeah, exactly. That's which is we'll get to that. But when you shoot the commercial, you get paid anywhere from $600 to $1,000 for the day. Now, I assumed that was the only money you were going to see. And then 3 months later, when the commercial airs, these aren't the rules now. These were the rules in the 90s. But 3 months later, when it starts airing on TV, every couple of weeks, you get paid royalties for every time it airs. And back in the 90s and the early 2000s, before the internet and YouTube and all this stuff, every time your commercial aired, they paid you $60. So if you did a Budweiser commercial that ran on every NFL and NBA game, on a Saturday or Sunday, you'd make $3,000. And they would have to pay you cumulative because it would be running so many times. So like every 2 weeks, they'd make it rain if it was running like that. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't know any of this. I just thought, wow, I just got paid $600 to do this Glade commercial. That's great, man. I needed that $600.
What do you do in that commercial? Do you sniff something?
Oh, it's on YouTube. You can pull it up. It's I play a stinky frat boy. Me and two guys that I met on the set of there that changed the course of my life played the stinky frat boys. And remember the show Freaks and Geeks?
Yes, I love Freaks and Geeks.
Okay, the mom from Freaks and Geeks plays the den mother of the fraternity house, and she's like, these are my boys, all 24 of them, and they're pretty stinky, but I use Glade air freshener. And at the time my hair was like Ali Del Franco's length. So if you put in Glade air freshener commercial something frat house 1997, it'll come up. So 1996, blah, blah, blah. I do that commercial, that deodorant commercial, Glade air freshener commercial. And I played a small role in an HBO film called Flashback that was about like teens who do drugs, which was starring the Pink Power Ranger. God, what was her name? Anna Jo Beth something. Anyway, she went on to fame and fortune being the Pink Power Ranger. But it was just a dumb after school special, and I played the drug dealer kid because I had the long hair and whatever. But so I'm toiling away for a while. I'm not really making, I'm making $100 a day working at MTV. I'm making maybe $100 twice a week emceeing at the comedy clubs. I'm surviving, but I'm surviving because I only have a bagel for breakfast and Chinese food at midnight. And, just typical 22, 23-year-old, like, struggling dude. And somewhere around 1997, because we shot that Glade commercial in December of 1996.
In New York?
In New Jersey at an actual college campus. It was weird. They spent way too much money for a fucking Glade commercial. But so I didn't know that there was such a thing as royalties or residuals. I still was very naive. And so in March of 1997, by that time I'd formed a sketch troupe with the boy that I'd met doing that commercial with, the guy who really changed my life in a lot of ways. There were like 20 actors that they hired to be the frat boys in that Glade commercial. And among those 20, I think only 4 of us got paid residuals because we were on camera more than once. Because that's the thing. You can be in a commercial, but unless you have a speaking line or 3 times the camera goes on your face, you're not getting residuals. Yeah. So I really lucked out because I'm just in a couple of shots, but they decided that me and PJ and this guy, like Sean McLean, were like the principals. So we got the residuals. But what ended up happening was I didn't know anything about that. And in March of 1997, I was working as a video store clerk at Champagne Video on the Upper East Side. I was teaching improv to kids on the weekends, and I was bartending on Sunday nights at a bar called Fitzpatrick's, and somehow trying to make it happen. I was also doing production work for MTV when I could afford to be able to take a day off and work there. So I was just hustling, and then in late 1997, early 1998, 2 things happened. One was one of the guys that I met doing that commercial was a fellow by the name of PJ Morrison. Now, at the time, PJ had been a child actor in the 70s and 80s. He was in the movie Creepshow 2. He was in Underoos commercials. He was kind of established, but he was also sort of an aspiring writer. And at the time, he was Norm Macdonald's writing assistant on Saturday Night Live. And he had always wanted to try stand-up. He'd been a very successful comedy writer and an actor, but he'd never actually tried stand-up, despite the fact that he was writing for Saturday Night Live, like, fresh out of college. And so he and I made a pact that I would show him how to do stand-up if he would show me how to write for television. And we kept that pact for the next 30 years. And he
awesome.
Really helped me move up the ranks at MTV very quickly. What happened was, and this all happened in a matter of about 6 weeks. Between December of 1997 and the end of January 1998, 2 things happened. One, me and Eric Fogel and a bunch of my friends made a claymation short called, at the time it was Marilyn Manson versus Hanson. And Eric Fogel had submitted it to MTV as, a possible short to be played during the MTV Super Bowl special. And we were all excited, and they gave him almost no money for it, but we were like, oh my God, one of our silly little things is going to be on the MTV.
Yeah, that's great.
Special, cool. And at the same time, I'd been sent on this audition by my agent. They were looking for a young comedian or actor to basically be the national spokesperson for Starburst candies. And it was like a $300,000 contract,
Whoa.
3 years, 10 commercials a year. It was one of those life changers.
Did you have to eat the Starburst?
And I still do. Still at 50. So what happened was I went to the audition, and there were auditions for like weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And then finally, I think the second week of January, my agent was like, they're going to fly you out to LA because it's between 3 dudes, and you're one of the 3 dudes. And the other 2 dudes were Christopher Fitzgerald, who went on to amazing success as a Broadway actor, really, really talented guy. And and Danny Masterson from that 70s show. The guy, did you ever see that 70s show? He
Yes.
played Hyde, yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah, he had an interesting, troubled past.
brother, we'll get into that. But so it was between the three of us, and one of us was going to walk away with this contract. Now, at the same time, Danny Masterson and I were in callbacks for the role of Hyde on that 70s show. So we already knew each other from callbacks. And we got along peas and carrots because at the time I thought he was a real cool guy.
Yeah.
So eventually, what ended up happening, and this all happened in the last week of January, I flew back to New York from LA, and I thought, well, even if I don't get it, I got to fly first class on an airplane. And and eventually I found out that I didn't get the role on the 70s show, and that it went to Danny. And I thought, that's okay. He's awesome. Like, that's cool. And the last week of January, I remember it so specifically because my agent called me up, and she was like, do you want to meet for dinner? And I was like, yeah, cool. And she's like, have you ever been to Sushi by Gary? And like, I knew Sushi by Gary was like this real like fancy pants sushi restaurant, and I thought,
Gary, huh?
Sushi by Gary. It's a
It's a very traditional Japanese
right?
name.
But it was one of those restaurants.
Gary.
It was one of those restaurants in like the most expensive part of the Upper East Side. It was the size of the room we're in now. It had maybe 5 tables and one chef, Gary.
That's how they do it.
And yeah, dude. And so I was a little nervous at first because I was like, oh, is she going to pay for it? I hope she does, because I really can't afford Sushi by Gary. And I'm sitting at the restaurant waiting for her to show up, and I see her come through the front door, and she's got a bottle of Cristal with her. And I was like, what? So she came down, sat next to me, put it down. And she was like, you're the Starburst guy, motherfucker. And I was like,
whoa.
And we were jumping up and down,
awesome.
and we got smashed at Sushi by Gary. And then about 2 weeks later, Celebrity Deathmatch made their debut on the MTV as part of the Super Bowl, just as like an interstitial animation in the middle of the MTV Super Bowl party. And the reaction was so big that they just, they approached Fogel and Berge, and, they were in charge, and they were like, do you think you need 26 episodes a year? And they lied and said yes.
Yes.
And then we all threw up and we celebrated. So by the time, this is where it gets crazier. So this is when I moved to LA. So what they didn't tell me was that the guy directing all of these Starburst commercials was a young commercial and music video director, now one of the biggest blockbuster directors in America, named Doug Liman. You may have seen a couple of his films. He did that Brad Pitt movie, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. He did that Tom Cruise movie, The Edge of Tomorrow.
Those are excellent movies.
He's a fucking genius. But at the time, he only had one movie under his belt called Swingers. He'd made that movie with Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau produced it and wrote the screenplay. Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau starred in it, and Doug was the director. And in 1996, that movie was like one of the biggest indie hits of the 90s. So he was really starting to get big money offers. And of course, even for a director, all those commercials, I mean, I can't imagine what they paid him to direct all those. But it was cool because it started kind of a rapport between the two of us, because it was like we were like coworkers now. Like every 3 months we'd shoot 3 more commercials for 3 years, and we were both young enough that we were like, wow, this is some crazy money. So 1998, 99, 2000, 2001, I was both doing Celebrity Deathmatch and doing those Starburst commercials at the same time. So now I'm 25, 26 years old, and I'm pulling down about $250,000 a year. And this is where it all went to shit.
A classic Hollywood story.
Dude, you know what's so funny? Yeah, man. So actually, no, if you want to roll that
Let's
clip
see the
from
commercial.
the Starburst. So, okay, this.
You nailed that. That's awesome.
Well, the
Totally
coolest
see
thing
your,
about
your energy, your stage presence there.
the funniest thing about those commercials, and I really got to credit Doug Liman for that, is he would do this thing where he'd be like, give me two for the ad guys, and you can do one for you. So I would have to do 2 exactly as the ad copy was written. And the ad copy was written by a very talented comedian / copywriter himself named Brian Flynn. So I would do 2 as it's supposed to be. And then the third take, I could take my dick out or jump over the counter or say whatever. And towards the end, eventually the ad guys would be like, that outtake is funny. Can we just not have the dick out and just have when he jumps over the... because a lot of things like that little dance I do at the end that wasn't in the script, or the whole
I believe it. That's totally you.
It was just all it was just me. Like, granted, it was me on a mountain of cocaine and booze, but that's the way that I booked it. Was they were basically what happened was Danny Masterson had the look they wanted, and Chris Fitzgerald was the best actor of the 3. He still is. But they kept saying, this dude does something totally different on every take, and he's fucking fearless. And they were eventually like, this is we want to push our product. So eventually, things started changing. I got a nice apartment on the Upper East Side. And at one point, I was jumping back and forth between the West Coast and the East Coast because we shot all the commercials in Los Angeles, in Van Nuys, California, and then we were working on Celebrity Deathmatch here in New York. So I was flying probably twice a week, just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and that required a lot of booze and a lot of coke and a lot of weirdness. And at one point, here's the reality of the entertainment industry. If you're making everybody a lot of money, they don't care if you're killing yourself with alcohol and drugs, because they think, well, that's his fuel, and we'll just keep him going until he's dead, and then we'll find a new Sean. And I didn't know that, because I thought, well, surely somebody would tell me to stop if I was being too crazy. And by 2001, something like that, I was probably drinking a bottle of Jameson a day and doing like an 8-ball like every 36 hours, something like that. But I was still able to do stand-up every night, and I was still able to have my pages for MTV every morning. I was still able to knock out those commercials. But I was 25 to like 28, where you can get up with a hangover at 6 a.m. and still bring it.
That's true.
And then a couple of things.
But it doesn't feel good.
Nah, it feels pretty gross. I mean, what ended up happening is it all kind of came to a head in 2001.
Try to snort some Starburst.
Brother, there are things I've done with the Starburst that I'm not proud of. It's because at the time, that was the first time I had ever experienced in a very minuscule way, in like a really stupid candy-ass way.
I mean, it's quite impressive for the narrowing down and the continuing of the auditions and everything.
Well,
it's not nothing.
It was fun, but I shouldn't have.
It's something nobody can take that away from you. You were the Starburst man. Like,
well,
there's less Starburst men than there are presidents. So that's impressive.
Well, thanks, man. The thing that was weird was, almost all my stuff is writing or voiceover. So for the first time and only time in my life, I was on TV enough that if I was on an airport or I was walking through Times Square, people would, do the equivalent of getting a selfie. Like, I would walk and somebody would be like, "Hey, it's the Starburst dude," and I'd be like, "Oh, hey, man,
draw a picture of us together."
Yeah, take this phonograph and record your voice. But it was flattering, and it suddenly girls that probably wouldn't have given me the time of day were less likely to, Yeah, I mean, things got easier for me in a lot of different ways, and I just kept partying and just being an idiot. And eventually, me and my like 8 best friends, 9 actually, we formed this sketch troupe that was originally called the Famous Corporation when we did it at Stand Up New York. But eventually, when Caroline's, which is a very famous club in Times Square, eventually, had us move the show to them. And every Tuesday, we had our sketch show at Caroline's for like hundreds of people in the middle of Times Square. And it was me and a cadre of 9 of the most talented 20-somethings ever. Crazy talented. Some of the guys are like Eric Bergman came over from Celebrity Deathmatch and whatnot. He was doing a lot of really brilliant guy. PJ Morrison, who was the creator of Best Week Ever and Cash Cab, and the guy who got me into MTV and, you know, working there. Sean McLean, who unfortunately is no longer with us. A couple other people are no longer with, but
What was the name of the guy who hosted Cash Cab?
Ben Bailey.
Ben Bailey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen him. And
He's
live.
coming.
He's very funny.
Yeah, I opened for him pretty regular. He's actually coming out this way.
Oh wow.
He's a good guy too. Funny. So we had this sketch troupe, and it was like, at the time when I was 29, it was like my opus. Like, we had the funniest. We had the first multimedia sketch comedy troupe ever. We were using technology that was cutting edge for 2001. Basically, what we tried to do is cause and effect sketch comedy that was multimedia. So if you and I were doing a sketch on stage and you throw a basketball at my head on stage and the basketball bounces off and it leaves, immediately a screen would drop down and there'd be a short film about where the basketball went, and it rolled out into Times Square and a homeless guy found it, and then they start playing an NBA game and one of them scores a basket, and then it cuts immediately to two guys on ESPN and be like, "We're here with bum basketball, we're blah blah blah." And it was the most frenetic sketch troupe ever. And we would do all the filming ourselves. I bought 2 Canon XL1 cameras, which was state of the art in 2000. We had a MacBook, which was state of the art in 2000, and we were the best and one of the most dangerous, crazy sketch troupes ever. So much so that by 2001, SNL started trying to poach members of us, and Mad TV were trying to poach members of us. And Warner Brothers, that summer of 2001, I had a meeting with Warner Brothers Television. They wanted to give us our own show.
Whoa.
And it was...
Where was Warner Brothers at the time? Were they in LA or...
No, they were at 1516 6th Avenue. So they weren't too far. They were like 10 blocks up from MTV. And I mean, obviously they have offices in Los Angeles, but the New York division is on 56th and 6th.
Okay. Yeah.
So everything was coming together. Now, granted, I was still drinking and getting coke, but things were working out. And then on September 11th, 2001, woke up early. And
something happened that day.
Yeah, I think there wasn't golf that day. There was what ends up happening is I used to, when we would do final edit before the show on Tuesday, I would bring all my footage from my laptop and I'd bring it down to the NYU Film Center because I still had my student ID and I still looked like a student, and I would sneak in to do the master cut on an Avid that they had at the NYU. So 7 a.m. or so, all hung over with my laptop underneath my arm, I go in, I sneak into the film building, and I start editing. And after about an hour and a half or so, I start to get, cramped. I'm cracking my knuckles. And I just go to stretch my legs, maybe have a cigarette, whatever. And I notice that the entire performing arts building at NYU is empty. And I'm like, what is it, a Jewish holiday? So I eventually go down to the lobby, and there's just this one dude sitting in the lobby, and I'm like, buddy, where is everybody? And this dude who looked like Patrice O'Neal was like, man, you didn't hear an airplane hit a building downtown. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, an airplane. And I thought, oh, like a Cessna might have clipped it or something like that.
Thought.
And so I'm like, is that why nobody's here? He's like, I don't know, man. Some idiots up on the roof watching it happen right now, but everybody else just went home, man. If I could go home right now, if I could go, I'd go home. You should go home. And, of course, being an idiot, I ran to the top of the building. I heard you said idiot.
Those who I relate to. I'm going there.
This looks like a job for Captain Delusion.
You said roof?
Yeah. So I run to the top of the building, and there's like 10 or so students, and we're all standing on the building, and we're watching smoke billow out of Tower 1. And I immediately thought, Oh God. And one of the girls in my sketch troupe, Ann Day, her day job was she was a secretary for a company called Cantor Fitzgerald, which was on the 92nd floor of Tower 1. And I thought, oh Jesus, I hope Annie's okay. And then we watched the second plane hit the other tower, and that's when I knew Pete's firehouse in Brooklyn was definitely going to get called in, because an accident of this scale, it's all in.
Yeah.
It's not just Manhattan. They're going to call them in from Jersey City. They're going to call them in from Brooklyn.
They came from here.
And yeah, dude. And there's that beautiful picture of Ladder 213 going across the Brooklyn Bridge towards, and Pete was in there, and we had a show that night, and obviously Caroline's was closed that night, and we spent the entire night at the bar that I bartended at, that all the firefighters would hang out with, all night just waiting to get a phone call saying that Pete and Ann were okay. Ann's husband, Patrick, who was also a member of her sketch troupe, was sitting there with me. Pete's brother, David, who was also a member. And we just sat there till the sun came up waiting for the call. And neither made it out. And it was a slow burn, but when that slow burn crested, I had about a month later a meltdown on the stage of Caroline's, because when it happened, I begged my agent and my manager and all my handlers. I'm like, please don't make me do stand-up anymore. Please don't make me do stand-up anymore. I'm not feeling very stable right now, and I'm going through. And they were all like, yeah, kid, don't worry about it. Take a week off, go to Disney World, get laid, go have a. But you have that show next month, and come on, you got some more Starburst commercials you got to do, and you got to do that. You got to play the mailman on Honey, I'm Home, and da 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 da. And so I was like, okay, well, maybe a little more Coke, a little more whiskey, I can do this. This will be okay. Okay, I'll be all right. And I was trying to maintain, and then one night they brought me up on stage at Caroline's, and I was trying to get through the first joke, and I literally just turned to the crowd and I was like, two of my best friends are dead. They died in the towers. And then it got an applause break. I'm like, don't applaud. What are you applauding for? Why would you applaud? And then I started laughing, but I started crying, and I was like, why is that an applause? Hooray, hooray. They're deceased, like. None of this is funny, and I don't know why I have to be on stage right now. I have to be on the stage right now because people who make money off of my being on stage are forcing me to be here, and I don't want to be here. I just want to curl up in a ball and just get drunk, and I don't want to fucking be here. And can I please get off the stage? And eventually PJ and one of the hosts came over, and they were like, hey, give it up for Sean, man. He's doing his best. He's blah, blah, blah. And then I went into the dressing room at Caroline's, and I fucking destroyed. I punched out mirrors. I broke chairs. I got banned for 14 years from Caroline's.
That's a long time.
I knew what I was doing.
You think they'd be a little bit more empathetic, I guess. I'm sorry for your loss, man. That's really heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I was too. I was too for many years. I think I did that so that they'd see I was serious.
Yeah, that's a good. You sent the message.
I wasn't aware how destructive it was going to be, but what ended up happening was I quit acting and I quit stand-up and I quit everything that was making me any money, because at the time I had enough money that I thought, well, I never need to work again if I don't want to. You think things like that when you're 26, 27 years old. And so I agreed to honor all my voiceover contracts. The Starburst contract was ended in the summer of 2001, so that wasn't on the table anymore. But I honored any voiceover work I was doing for like Celebrity Deathmatch, any voiceover work I was doing commercially, which was a lot at the time. So that was also there to sustain me. Like at the time, I was the voice of Pizza Hut. I was the voice of Amstel Light. I was the voice of Motorola. So those, as long as I showed up every 2 weeks and did like one of those, like Motorola, be heard, like the checks kept coming. And I just kept drinking and partying. And I went from the kid in the Starburst commercial to looking like Phil Hoffman, by the time I was 35 or something. And slowly but surely, somewhere around 37, 2007, 35. So I was 35 in 2007. A couple of my comedy friends, among them Nick Kroll and Jesse Klein and Judah Friedlander and Zach Galifianakis and the Sklar brothers and a couple other people, were eventually kind enough, because I would still go to the comedy shows, and I go to the comedy shows, get drunk, and laugh. I was there to support, man. I still loved comedy. I just wasn't going to do it anymore. And I guess one night they kind of cornered me at this club at Rafifi, and they were like, "Hey, man, I know you don't want to do stand-up anymore, but like we're kind of in a pinch and we need an MC. Would you mind just MCing the show? Like we just need an MC." It's like you'd really, and they knew the psychology of we really need your help. And I'd be like, "Yeah, man, all right, yeah, okay." So, and once again, this is another like Murderer's Row. The people we had on the show at the time for that show that I emceed was like Christian Finnegan, who would go on to be by that time he was already the white guy on Chappelle's show and Best Week Ever and whatnot. Pete Holmes, like a decade before he did Crashing. Nick Kroll, obviously, Jesse Klein, Jason Matsoukas, like basically John Mulaney before he like John like a 10-year-old John Mulaney.
Yeah, I was say he's kind of young now still. I mean
he's
mid-range, with 40s or something.
Yeah, at the time I think he was like 25. I mean, in 2007, I don't know. I just remember he was just so baby-faced, and I remember just thinking, Jesus, that good-looking and talented? Jesus, where you been hiding? And so I hosted the show. It was a Tuesday night. I don't know what the significance is, but it was a Tuesday night. Sorry, no, that one was a Thursday night. Their show on Thursday nights, Nick Kroll and Jesse Klein had a show in a little bar in the East Village. The bar was called Rafifi, and in the back they had a 50-seater theater, no bigger than this room that we're in now. And they did a show called Welcome to Our Week, and they would have some of the greatest comedians of more like your generation before anything had really happened for them. Like they were again working comedians, doing whatever. But I loved the show because I couldn't believe the talent. And these guys were young to me at the time. I was 35 and they were like 25. So I was like, these guys give me hope. They're great. And then of course, eventually by like 2010, like they all went out to Hollywood, and the rest is history. But at the time, they were kind enough to ask me to come and MC a show. And it was a really pleasant experience. And it made me want to go back into stand-up. I wouldn't actually do it for another like 6 months to a year, but it planted the seed that I could still do it. Because I knew I had to get sober and get my shit together before, because I was still like just a quivering lump of fucking, so that I guess that would take me to in 2008 I got clean.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And that was crazy. I'm trying so hard to.
Did you go do Ibogaine in Mexico or something like that?
Dude, this is a very weird story, and this is something I've never talked about on. We'll see how it goes. This is all the truth. Believe what you like. In 2008, I had reached like a crazy crescendo of drug abuse and alcohol abuse. Like, my liver was shutting down. I was just a fucking hot mess. And I guess at the time, looking back, I think I really wanted to die. I really felt like if I died, then I'd be honoring my dead. It made sense in my brain.
Yes, dark thoughts.
Yeah, man.
Logical at the time.
And I kind of liked being the Dudley Moore of the comedy scene. In I don't know. I don't know. You hate yourself and you just do silly things. And I had a friend who had been a drug dealer and a drug abuser, and now he was a preacher. of this little church on St. Mark's Place in Greenwich Village called City Light. And every Sunday he would do this service, and most of the people that were in his church were there were some devout believers. There were also a lot of people from rehab, and a lot of people trying to get back from being homeless and whatnot. Like, he was literally doing like God's, like he was there to, and occasionally I would go to watch him preach and do his thing, because for some fucking reason I needed to be reminded that there was still good in the world. Even though I in no way wanted to participate. I was just there to like...
Yeah, church is good vibes regardless of your opinion on it, really. That's
Thank
how I felt.
Thank you for saying that, man, because hearing a young, good-looking cat like you say that makes me feel less stupid. Because a lot of times when I talk about this experience, like, younger people get very like, ew, is he gonna say rehab stuff? But I'm telling you, man, this was the craziest thing, and this changed my life. Oh God, where was I in 2008? In 2008, I was living on the Upper West Side. My comedy career was long gone. I was still making some money doing voiceovers. That was it. By that time, I wasn't working as a writer anymore. I wasn't working as a actor anymore. I was, outside of doing voiceovers, I wasn't working as a comedian anymore. I was just some drunk dude. And then my mom started to get sick. She had like these like lesions on her brain, and which I'm convinced is what led to her Alzheimer's later in her life. But at the time, I was just worried that what was happening with her brain was gonna kill her dead in 2008, which if that had happened in 2008, brother, we would not be having this conversation. I would have had the courage to see that thing through. But I was scared. And so Easter Sunday, after a crazy bender of drugs, alcohol, and cocaine, I showed up disheveled on Sunday morning services at my friend's fucking church. I'm literally sitting there all banged up. And it was sort of a Baptist church, and so the
snakes.
No, man, like good music,
okay.
like Harlem style, like good, like awesome shit, like Otis Redding church music. You know what I mean? Like, it was amazing. So I just go there, and I just want to come there. And he had this thing. He had this thing that he did at the end of every sermon. At the very end, he would say, and he was a big guy. He was bigger than you. He was like, I'm going to say like 6'2". He was like Carson Daly size. and he would always, at the end of his service, he would always say, is there anyone that needs God's help? Is there anybody that's really struggling this week? Is there anybody who wants to come up here and we'll pray with you? And we'll try and see if God can help see you through. And if he can't see you through, maybe he can help you have peace in your heart so that you can handle whatever's hurting you, And I used to watch every week, somebody would raise their hand, some lady come out, oh, my sister lost her foot to diabetes. And he'd be like, oh, okay, everybody, let's pray that Sister Nancy's sister doesn't lose a foot to diabetes. And then, they'd go and sit down and whatnot. And I'd watched this happen 1,000 times. And so when he said it, I raised my hand. And I remember Boyan just went. But after he had brought 3 or 4 of his normal congregation up for that, eventually he was like, okay, well, this is a friend of mine. He's a very funny friend of mine. And he's a good guy. He's having some troubles, but I want him to come up here. And so I came up. And, I'm like, and he's like, this is Sean. And
we can smell him.
Yeah. So he goes, and you know I did stink. My pants were pissed, and I've been doing coke for like 4 days straight. That sweat? That like cocaine head, like the coke head sweat, where it's like 3 days of just like all your clothing is drenched in sweat. I don't know why you stop showering when you become addicted to cocaine, but I did.
Yeah, you think it'd be kind of fun to jump in there.
Like, it was, but anyway, so So I'm beat up, and he calls me up on the altar, the stage, or whatever you want to call it, and he says, "This is my friend Sean, and I think he needs our help. Sean, is there something that you want God to help you with today?" And of course, I'm like, "Yeah, my mom's really sick, and it looks like she's probably gonna, it's gonna be bad. So, if anybody's got a direct line to God, can you help me?" And so, he put his big old bear paw of a hand on my shoulder, and he reached out to the congregation, and then the entire congregation reached out the same way to his hand, which was like something out of like the Wrath of Khan or something. It was like, and he just, while holding me with this arm, like my arm around here, he reached out to them and he just goes, "God, my friend Sean is very afraid that he's going to lose his mother. If it is in your wisdom to save her, please do so, because it makes his heart heavy, and I want my friend to have a lighter heart. And if it is in your will to take her, please grant him the serenity to be able to handle that." And he pulled his hand back, and the congregation pulled their hands back, and then he slapped his other hand on my chest. And much like you see in those videos, I practically passed the fuck out. And I understand now why they do that. It's
energy.
There's only so much emotion a human being can handle. And when you're in that much pain and feeling that much love from 150 or so strangers, it's too much for your brain. It resets your brain. It fucks you up. And I kind of passed out. I fell like a June bride into his arms. But I maybe 3 seconds I kind of blacked out there. I didn't fall on the floor. I just sort of had one of those like fainting kind of things. But the craziest thing happened during those 3 seconds. And I swear on my mother's soul and my father's soul and my own soul. In those 3 seconds, something happened. The best way I can describe it logically, it's like my soul got some sort of a spiritual enema.
That's an excellent description.
God did not come off some clouds. Angels did not sing. The clouds didn't part. But a single shot of powerful information penetrated my consciousness and completely rewired my brain. It completely rewired my personality. It completely undid years of psychological damage, years of drug addiction. And it was the simplest piece of advice ever, but it has been my mantra and my credo for the past 17 years. And all that information said, because it wasn't a voice, it was information, was tragedies and loss and death and famine and war and injury, all of these horrible things that plague human beings. The reason that they exist is not because God isn't listening. It's because he has enough faith in us as human beings that he believes we can save each other.
Fuck yeah.
I mean, you know, because you served. We can save each other. Every terrible thing everything that ever happens in this life that breaks our heart was designed for two reasons: to illuminate a difficult truth and to activate our heroism. So your dog knows that.
Yeah, he's going nuts.
That's a hero dog. It rewired my brain so completely that I spent about a year getting straight, like just, you know, because
It's a process.
it hurts your body after 14 years of nonstop whiskey and cocaine. Your body will punish you for not feeding it that. So I literally just spent a year like on the floor of my living room just sweating it out. And then somewhere around late 2008, 2009, I started doing stand-up again, and eventually I started touring. I did my first tour in 2009 with then unknown comedians Mark Normand, Sean Donnelly, and Jordan Carlos, and Scott Wallace. And you know, we were doing this tour where like all of us were getting paid like $200 a show, but we were going to like Baltimore and Boston and Pittsburgh and to us it was like, oh my God, you know. Also, might I mention, all five of us got one hotel room.
Oh,
so each night we had to decide who got the bed or who got the floor. And eventually we got cool enough with each other where we do like head to toe. And each and then the odd man out had to sleep on the floor. And then, you know, slowly but surely I started doing a lot more voice work. Like eventually I came, you know, I'd done during the bad times, I'd done some voice work for the Grand Theft Auto series, you know, doing the DJ for that, and then doing some other interstitial voices.
which Grant? You said you were in
3.
Was the fourth 3?
3.
Okay.
Yeah. I was I was the DJ. There was DJ Michael Humber in Liberty City, right? You know, doing all that shit.
Wow.
And then
so
I would
again, people have heard hours and hours of your voice.
Oh yeah. And then occasionally I'd do like the cuckoo people that call in, you know, being like,
wow, that's fun.
Oh, well, you're not. And
Did you ever do prank calls as a kid?
yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you fit that.
Oh my God, yeah. Me and a very, very funny guy named Brian Mack, who's gone on to great success writing television commercials. He's still funnier than me. But we would do shit, and we were like two nerds, you know, like in the 4th grade, and you know, we would call our grammar school and prank, you know, like I remember there's one where. It doesn't matter, but we would do prank phone calls, and that was fun. I don't know how good we were at it, but we thought it was funny. But anyway, so 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12. You know, I'm just kind of getting back to life. I'm kind of getting back to doing stand up regularly, and I still wasn't acting. I was just doing voiceovers and stand up. And then somewhere around 2011, 2012. I started getting involved with the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation. It was because I lost my dad to cancer, and I lost part of this eye, the same shit. And I decided that was going to be my mission in life, that I was going to go and like visit kids and then bring my ukulele and do all my cartoon voices for them and whatnot. And then eventually I met this really cool guy named Lionel Leventhal, who was a member of the Friars Club. And he would do this yearly benefit show called the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation Benefit. And he would get together all these big-name comedians and talents to come and perform. And sometimes some of the kids would perform as part of it, too. So it was sort of a talent show for the kids who were battling. And then they'd sprinkle in, you know, like Harrison Greenbaum and, you know, like Jeff Ross, one of those guys. Mm-hmm. And so in 2012, he was like, I want you to host this year's benefit, which was a huge thing. It was like, I'd never worked with the Friars Club before. That's, to me, the Friars Club is Joe Rogan's podcast. Mm. If you get invited to play the Friars Club, you have arrived. The Friars Club, in case you don't know, was founded by like guys like Sinatra and Jerry Lewis, and Jackie Gleason, Lucille Ball, and
The original Illuminati.
The original aces of comedy. And it's this big, beautiful mansion in the middle of Park Avenue and 55th Street. And you know, it's you know, like the first floor is like a restaurant and a bar and a blah, blah, blah. And the second floor is this giant theater and a poker room. And the third floor is like a sauna and a gym. And then the fifth floor. And it's just designed for entertainers. You have to be like a top shelf musician or a top shelf comedian, or you cannot join. And you have to get voted in by the council of, you know, I think the first president was Jerry Lewis, and I think one of the last presidents was I know Jeff Ross was for a while, but it's handed down, and the council has to vote, and there's not a lot of members. There's, you know, maybe like 300 or 400 in existence at the moment, and you know, I got to meet Don Rickles there and all these other people. Like, it was fucking crazy, man. It was you know, but it all happened because I was hosting this first time that they invited me to host the show. You know, I was a little intimidated because I knew that I was out of my depth. You know, I'm not Jerry Seinfeld. I'm not Jeff Ross. I'm not blah, blah, blah. I know these guys. I've worked with them, maybe Owen for them, but I'm not them. And Lionel was so cool about it. He was like, just be yourself, man. Just use that energy, man, and talk about your struggles. Talk about your eye. And so, you know, I did this real funny up front on the thing, and then I just did this speech that was really directed at these kids, most of them without hair. And I was like, look, you need to know something. This is something that I discovered when I was very little, and I had to have all those eye operations, is that if you survive, you are endowed with these superpowers. You become the most fearless, brave person on earth, and you can't be defeated by anything. It literally is like becoming a Marvel superhero. So just bear it in mind, man, because I was sitting right where you are when I was 11 years old, and I'm 47 at the time. I would have been 40. I was just turning.
That's
40.
an amazing thing to tell kids in that position.
Fuck yeah, dude. You watched their posture change. And it was like, and that's when I was like, oh, this is what I was meant to do. This more than anything else. And then, you know, of course, the comics went up and they all killed it and blah, blah, blah. And then Lionel was like, that's it. Like, that's your thing. And eventually I got into the good graces with the Friars, and that kind of changed everything, because then suddenly I was touring with like John Fugelsang and Don Jameson and
you did a show in Texas with I'm forgetting his name.
Pauly Shore.
Pauly Shore. Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah. That was a good one. That was actually in the 90s, so that was kind of a fluke. But yeah, I got chased out of a comedy club.
By who?
By the crowd.
Oh.
It was, 1997 was like, Texas wasn't that cool. And we were doing like some club called like Froggy Bottoms, I believe was the name of it.
I tell you what.
Oh, dude, you are not fucking kidding. At the time,
tie your horse up right here.
At the time, my hair was like the same length as like Taylor Swift.
We don't take too kindly to that around here.
Brother, they sure fucking
long-haired boy from New York.
They're already like, he probably the headliner, so they don't even like him, and they just paid $20 to see him. And then I opened for him, and I've got long blonde hair, and like, and the audience just hate fucked me for like 4 shows. And then on the 5th show, I decided I didn't care. Oh, dude, this was the year before Starburst, so I was nothing. I was just the that was opening for him. So I get up on. So at first I'm going up and I'm trying to do my usual stuff, and it's either silence or booing. And the intro that they would give me, because this was my only credits in 1997, they were like, this next comedian has performed on MTV from New York City. Give it up for Sean Lynch. I think it was something like that. And that credit automatically made them mad. They'd be like, "Whoa!" I get up on stage, they're like, "Hey, everybody, it's good to be here." Whoa! So, what's any Cowboys in the audience? Whoa! And like maybe I'd soften the blow from but it was just getting me angry and angry. And so finally on that Sunday, I was like, look, I wanted the MC. I said, look, do me a favor, man. Do not say that MTV or New York City or anything like that. Just say, local boy gonna tell some jokes and keep the grammar ignorant. I want to win these people over. And the host just looking at me like, what? I'm like, just say local boy gonna tell some jokes and then my last name. Trust me, they'll like Lynch. And so, sure as shit, last show, Sunday night, he said, all right, ladies and gentlemen, there's next comedian coming up to the stage. Local boy, gonna tell some jokes. Give it up for Sean Lynch. And for the first time, I got a big applause. And I walked out on stage. And, you know, I had my hair tied up in a ponytail, and I tucked that ponytail up into my baseball cap. So I looked like a normal, you know what I mean?
You lynched your hair.
Yeah, dude. And so I get up on stage, and I'm like, hey, man, how y'all doing, man? I'm so excited to be here, man. This is crazy, man. Hey, how many people here went to church here, right? We all go to It's Sunday. You better go to church. You better go to church. This guy knows what I'm talking about. He been to church. I can tell. You got me there. The wife let you come out tonight, but you had to go to church, didn't you? And they're all like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, man. You ever you're parking in a parking lot, you know, and you know the pastor just saw your gun rack, and you're like, oh, well, I came here to be forgiven, man. You know, fuck it. You know, they're like, and I'm for 5.5 to 10 minutes, I'm literally feeding them their own lives, and they're like, this guy's great. And I should have seen a more professional comedian would have seen that through. And then brought up odd. But of course, I was a punk when I was 24, 25 years old. So once I realized I had them in the palm of my hand, I was like, yeah, man, that's cool, man. That's cool. You guys are all right, man. So the other day, man, I was, it was a Sunday afternoon, actually. I was sitting in my living room in New York City with my boyfriend, Jamal. And I'm reading the Sunday New York Times, but sometimes I like to, play the crossword puzzle. And he just whips that big, beautiful dick out, big black dick. And listen, man, I'm not made of stone. I just start sucking on that thing because, man, it's Sunday. It's time to feast. So I'm blowing his big, and I'm watching the crowd get like. And finally, one guy in the back is just like, and then the audience became like the villagers in the old Frankenstein movie. There's like pitchforks and like torches, and I just start to run off stage. I'm like, yeah, like LBGT forever, fuck you, hillbillies, we. And I get off stage, and the MC, who's also the owner of the club, was like, I'm not paying you for tonight. I'm like, that's fine. And I ran out the back exit, and I ran all the way across the parking lot, and then I ran across an 8-lane highway to get to the shitty hotel. It was like something out of a Bugs Bunny cartoon. I was like, ooh. And they're like, hey, where are they going on foot? So yeah, that was a quick little callback. But yeah, so anyway, so I started working with the Children's Brain Tumor Foundation in 2012, and which I still do to this day. And since then, I've been making films. I mean, I made a film about my experience in September 11th. That made it onto Amazon Prime in 2020 called Greenpoint Tavern. Parker Cross directed it. I wrote the screenplay and acted in it, and that was a very therapeutic way to work through September 11th. And since then, I've been writing screenplays for a couple other films. I wrote and directed the pilot for Every Other Sunday, which is also on Amazon Prime. And then I've had a short that's been running the festival circuit for about a year now called The Laws of Motion, which is basically my COVID film. And now I'm getting ready to go down to Virginia to start pre-production in 2025 with a film that's actually directed by the guy who directed my 9/11 film, Parker Cross. And he and I are working on the screenplay together like right now. It's called Welcome to My Nightmare, and it's kind of a horror comedy drama about social media and social anxiety and all this shit. And then what else? And then I guess the catch us up. In May, I decided to leave California, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I remembered how much I loved Marshall and Cinema Salem, and because I'd come back every year to do a comedy show, and they were always sellouts whenever I did the comedy show there. And then, you know, I think that's where I met you. I was hosting a Tuesday open mic at Cinema Salem.
Hell yeah.
It's fucking great. Like, I don't care what anybody says. I was having the time of, dude, everybody in New York and LA thought I had lost my mind. They were literally like, I'd be talking to my friends and they'd be like, how are you, man? Are you having fun with your open mic? And I'm like, oh, you don't understand. This is this next comedy boom. I found the next superstars. Listen, this is working out, you know, and I think they all thought I'd lost my mind until, like, slowly but surely, like, every 2 weeks or so, I'd go back to LA and New York and do, like, a show there. And so they were like, I don't know what this is all about. And now I feel like we're in kind of this sweet spot where, you know, 2025, brother, we got some big people coming to Cinema Salem. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Daily Show people, Chappelle people. Like, I knew it was going to take us a couple of shows before people took us seriously. Because it's hard. You know,
Yeah.
you start a room, everyone's a cynic until that one show that sells out or that one show. And it's one of the things that's been really cool about working with Ali Del Franco, because she is born to produce, and she's a hustler, and she is getting it done in ways that I'm not good at. I'm good at getting famous people to work for less money than they're actually worth out of friendship or the kindness of their heart. She's very good at getting butts in seats and making things financial successes. So it's been kind of a cool collaboration so far, you know. And we have a show tonight at the cinema, and it's almost half sold out.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. It's a ton of potential there.
That is all Allie, brother. That is like,
she's a machine.
She is an unstoppable force. So I guess that catches us up. I don't know.
Yes, sir. Sean Lynch. It was a pleasure, man. This was a lot of fun.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
great to
man.
hear your experiences.
Yeah, man, and I'm looking forward to all the stuff we're going to be doing in 2025. And
Yeah, Cinema Salem folks, come out. Pay
Cinema
attention.
Salem.
Look out for us.
Salem, Massachusetts, man. We're doing shows there on Thursday nights that are just gonna blow you out the back wall, and Jake and I are both gonna be on these shows. It's gonna be and most of our friends and occasionally some famous people, and really looking forward to it. And thank you for having me, man. This is really fun.
Sir, thank you. All right. Cheers.